Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. It's going to be a short talk and then longer questions and answers if anyone has any questions. So this is an exhibition with history. There's the history of Egypt from the Belle Epoque of the 1930s, the nationalization of the 1960s, the stagnation of the 80s and the revolution of 2011. I'd really encourage you to read the texts that go with the pictures. They tell it better than I ever could. About this project, I moved to Cairo in 2007 to study Arabic because my Arabic was holding me back as a photographer in the Middle East, and I ended up staying. The plan was just to go for a year and it didn't really work out. So I didn't really understand when I started photographing this circus thing, all of the history that was involved in the circus. It only became apparent to me in the years that followed. The exhibition also has a history. We first put on a show here in London in 2011 and 6 people came. Thank you very much for coming again. You know who you are. After the revolution in Egypt, we did the exhibition again in Cairo at Townhouse Gallery, and that was much more popular. We had clowns, we had knife throwers. We wanted to invite the boys here tonight, but we had some problems with health and safety in the UK, and they didn't appreciate the throwing of knives, so unfortunately we don't have any clowns for you this evening except us. Anyway, here we are at the Arab British Centre as part of the Shubbak 2013 festival. There's some really good stuff on this week, which you should go and see, and it's an honour to be included in the programme of Shubbak because it's got some great stuff there. So this project really pushed the limits of what you can describe with still photos, and as a photographer I'm always getting frustrated with talking about these big historical processes that have shaped so much of the Middle East. And I'm lucky enough to be working with writer Mona Abouissa.
Hello, that's me. Well, beside that, beside magic and backstage bureaucracy and 80 years of history, the State Circus in Egypt is actually the only governmental department where you can find men in leotards strolling around. So we had many difficulties with this project, many devils we had to fight, and I've been working on this project for 4 years. And one of these difficulties I had occurred when I had to come and talk with these young performers, young bronze men in those revealing leotards, and I kept saying to myself, Mona, just focus on the eyes, don't look at this bare chest, don't look at those nipples, just focus, you're a professional. So that's one of the occupational hazards you do. Later on I did another project, and again I had this difficulty. That was a project about state ballet, so it were more of those problems. My stories, most of my stories, if not all of them, are about men, like this one. And I think another reason, since I was a teenager, or maybe 12 years old, becoming that bubble of hormones, and I used to be very much fascinated about extraordinary. And when I grew up, my fascination didn't leave me about extraordinary. So I started to look, without realizing, I started to look for something extraordinary in people. And those people became inspirations for my stories. So what I learned is that human body and human mind have no limits. So if you actually conquer fear of death, you actually can create a magic that could last for 80 years. And that's what this project is about. It's in Cairo.
مهندسين.
مهندسين.
Yeah, أجوزة مهندسين in the Corniche.
There is also one in Gamasa, the State Circus. There is in Gamasa, there is where in
Arish.
Arish.
Asyut isn't State Circus land.
private?
This is the complicated thing about the State Circus. So the government owns the land in Asyut where they made the circus, but it's not dedicated circus land. It's simply land that's held by the government where they set up the circus.
There were like some reviews published in the magazines. It was quite interesting, surprising for me to see people in Egypt actually read stories. We Egyptians don't like to read much. And it was quite surprising to see actually people read stories. And there was a lot of people came.
Yeah.
And a lot of people.
And the opening was good with the knife throwing in the clowns, because a lot of people had just seen this dusty tent by the side of the Nile and never sort of imagined the work that goes into it, and to bring the clowns out of the ring and into a sort of factory gallery space where you can actually walk up to the performers and touch them. There's no sort of barrier there. Was quite nice for a lot of people to sort of see that there's this whole art form that Egyptians have been doing for decades that they didn't realise existed.
The State Circus is based on families, so it's a family business. And if you don't have a family, it's quite difficult. It's built on families that have been doing it since 1930s, 1920s.
Originally, I had permission from the current, or the then director of the circus, and I think he gave me permission, not realising how long I intended to spend hanging around.
How long did you?
From 2007, I'd come back and visit them
5
like
years.
a few times a year, and I would phone up the performers then and go backstage with the performers, with individual performers who I was friends with. They sell a lot of tickets in Gamasa by the sea, because people are on a holiday and they want to have something to fill their evenings with, families. So the performances are usually much more sold out in the seaside towns than they are in Cairo, when they sometimes have quite quiet days when half of the seats would be empty.
From what I noticed, usual like middle class, maybe low middle class Egyptians, anyone who could afford £30 ticket and has a family, loud one, and they want to go to the circus. And you may find veiled woman, not veiled woman. Yeah.
Then you have more expensive seats and cheaper
for
seats.
Khalijis.
So the
Khalijis,
the
yes,
Saudis
there's a
will have the
VIP
expensive
seats
seats.
during summer. Do you enjoy?
Thank you for
Stories?
coming.
Mr. President's Circus is about Egyptian State Circus. It's and state, and Egyptian as a state, as a politics and as art. It started since 1930s. So we look at the Egyptian history back then through the State Circus. And each phase in this history of Egypt has affected the Egyptian State Circus, so that's what we try to do, to show through the photographs and through text.
I've been interested in juggling since I was quite small, and so I moved to Cairo to study Arabic, and decided I was going to go and visit the circus and see how the professionals do this juggling thing. And I got very excited about the place. It was like this tunnel back into time, which I spent a long time exploring. It took me a long time to get my head around what was going on, why it was going on, who was whose father, who was whose grandfather, whose cousin that had a disagreement with whose cousin, and the rest of the politics involved in any ordinary Egyptian government bureaucracy.
I came to be interested in this project after John asked me come on and see what's happening there in the circus, and I was a bit reluctant. And then when I sat down with those people and we spoke about stories, about what they do, and about this all magic backstage, and I come to it like it's a first-hand experience with the circus, magical world of circus, and it's like in the movies, and you're right there, and you talk about magical tricks, and you also, beside that, you talk about politics, and you talk about this family's legacy, and they all came together under big red tent. So I got interested, and we kept coming back to it. It was interesting to know that backstage it's a whole family. It's a family business, or it's a family craft. It's passed from generation to generation. So I didn't know that. I know that's from the movies, and that's what you find there. That it's very hierarchical, and this hierarchy was established since many years. On top you have lion families, on the bottom you have clowns, in the middle you have acrobats. Actually, on the bottom you have donkeys who are fed to lions. So it's a family. It's a big family.
Some families would have a problem with being photographed and would have a problem with the idea of a foreigner poking their nose around their place of work. So I did have some problems about being allowed to photograph with some families' performers, but other families were very supportive of the project, very excited about it, and they understood that they could have their work seen by more people if it was being photographed.
For the John's photograph of Hamada and the lion, Richard, I like this photograph. It's also one of my favorite photographs. It's interesting, the relation between the beast and human being. So I really like that, and it's obvious that he has conversation with lion, and there's this dramatic setting, and you obviously almost don't see that it's behind the cage, so as if the John is inside, or we are inside the ring with them. And I chose a story to complement this photograph, a story about Hamada when he was 3 years old, when he first time went with lions inside the ring. And it was interesting to look backward when he was young and little, and his father was tired, so he asked his son, who was 3 years old, come with me inside the ring and help me to do this show, because I cannot cancel it. It's a governmental job. He cannot cancel it. And Hamada went inside with his father, helped him with the tools, or stage props, because nobody is allowed to go in. Only the lion tamer is inside. Otherwise, lions will eat the other person. They only focus on lion tamer, so you cannot really ask, oh, please, Mahmoud, come in, help me with that. No. So he asked his little son, 3 years old, to come in and help him. And that's what Hamada did. And since then, he told me that Monets became my game, my little passion. And I always wanted to go in with my father inside with the lions, and whenever he said, no, you stay here, he was crying, no, I want to go in, I want to go in. And then a couple of decades later, here he is, a very successful lion tamer, and he has these ambitious shows, and it's his own show, his own lions. And that's why I chose. I wanted to reflect why he was long ago 3 years old, and now he's a touring lion tamer.
The thing I like about the picture is the relationship Hamada has with his lions. They all have names, and he speaks to all of his lions in Russian. And I photographed Hamada a lot over the years, and this is probably one of my favorite pictures of him, because
the light is right, the mood between him and the lion is right. And after that shot was taken, not too long afterwards, Hamada left Egypt and went to Russia, and that was the end of his time with the State Circus.